We will call the Monday, January 9th, 2023 meeting of the Juvenile Detention Store to order. If Ms. Todd, you will call the roll.
Yes, Mayor Joe Carr.
Here.
Judge Stephen Daniel.
Here.
Leslie Collins.
Here.
Larry Maxwell.
Here.
Michael McDonald.
Here.
We have quorum. Mr. Vice Chair, have you reviewed the minutes?
I have.
Do you find them in order?
I do.
Ms. Duke, did you have a comment about the minutes?
Yes.
I'm seeing a little note here.
We were contacted on Friday and asked that from this day forth, Dr. Michael E. McDonald be addressed as such and not just Mr. McDonald. And so starting today and moving forward, that will be a change that we will be making.
That'll be fine. If there's no objection, all those in favor of approving the minutes and the amendment by saying aye.
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 All opposed, ayes have it. And Dr. McDonald, my apologies for referring to you as Mr. McDonald. Wasn't intentional. If I did that, I'm sure I did. It was an oversight.
Oh, in fact, I wasn't even aware it was going to be handled this way. I actually went backwater on this, so it's no harm, no foul.
Just want you to know it was quite unintentional on my part. Public comments. Rob Mitchell, the Rutherford County Property Assessor, wants to speak, and I want to remind the committee that the time that we've allocated for public comments is 3 minutes. So, Rob, you're welcome to come forward and address. Lynn?
I wonder if he should have a good microphone and if I should hop up.
Well, he can borrow mine.
Okay.
How about that? I got the good microphone. You got a microphone.
My name is Rob Mitchell, 3450 Northborough Court, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I appreciate the board giving me the time to speak with you about something that I'm passionate about. I would very much like us to consider bringing a life skills and critical thinking program to the juvenile detention facility that has been employed in other jurisdictions, and I believe that it would be successfully deployed here as well, involving life skill training and the game of chess. It's been done in Washington, D.C., it's been done in Atlanta, in Miami-Dade, Florida. It's currently, there's a program that is working in Chattanooga, and I believe that the effort and the time that we spend to invest in enriching children's minds and giving them the tools to make better decisions, then we may not have a lot of the issues that we may be seeing today.
Is this program one that's, you got some kind of format that's presented? How does it work?
Yes, sir. It's a program that was developed by Mr. Eugene Brown out of Washington, D.C. And I haven't seen his curriculum, but he's employed it. The movie Life of a King with Cuba Gooding Jr. was based on his life story, which is a very compelling story. And I believe Garland said they've actually shown the film here to students before in the past. But it's a structured learning environment where they will take positional pieces of the chess pieces and they will have the children make life skill analogies with them. And then, of course, they'll play chess. They learn the structure, they learn to think, they learn to plan, and to work through a problem rather than simply reacting to something immediately, what their first impulse might be. And it trains them to do that.
Sounds good.
Do you know if there's a cost?
The cost that we anticipate is about $10,000 to cover the cost to bring Mr. Brown to the state of Tennessee and cover his expenses. I've worked with working with Representative Mike Sparks and Representative Jeremy Faison. They would like to see this program expanded statewide. So they're currently going to the legislature to see if there can be some funding allocated to help bring him in. They want to take it statewide. My concern is we get it first. Whatever you bring to us, and we'll be the template for whatever is going to be rolled out statewide.
Do you know if there's a grant that we could possibly put in for to help us pay for this initially? Do you know?
I don't know of any.
It would be easy to make that determination, so we can make that.
Okay.
Do you play chess?
Yes, sir, I do.
You pretty good?
I'm average.
Rye Lopez or French defense?
I do, Rui. Sometimes I play the King's Gambit.
Rob, could you elaborate a little bit more on the movie?
Yes, sir. The movie Life of the King follows Eugene Brown, who, as a young man, he gets into trouble and he ends up doing something foolish, making a rash decision, which cost him, he says, 20 years of his life. It was actually 17 years in a federal prison. While he was in prison, he was taught to play the game of chess by someone who was serving life. And when he was going out on parole, he was given a king that the gentleman made for him that taught him to play chess. And he says, "You're the king. Always protect your king. And always remember that life is a game. It has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an end. Your beginning got off to a bit of a rocky start, but you still have your middle game and your end game. Keep your eye on your goal and work towards your goal and think before you make a move." He took his program to an inner city school in Washington, D.C. He got kids out of gangs. He took them to 2 national championships at the Super Nationals Scholastic Chess Championships that were held in Nashville in 2004 and 2005 and 2006. So it's a successful and vetted program that he brings to schools, he brings to prisons. I would like to see him talk to our sheriff about putting it into the adult detention center and maybe do something besides letting them play chess or play cards. I think it's what they do over there. Somebody told me that they spend most of their spare time playing cards or watching TV. Enter some structured learning to them so they might not recidivize and go back into the system where we as taxpayers would have to pay for having them there.
Any other questions?
It sounds wonderful.
I do have some comments. And I don't know if we want to keep this in the public comment or do some movement, but it might take more than 3 minutes.
Then we will defer this to other business, if that's okay?
Okay.
Unless there's another appropriate place.
Well, I have,
I want to respect the constraints that the committee, the board put on public comments to 3, and we
Right.
surpassed that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Not your fault.
I've got a spot for it on the agenda.
Well, good. And then you can tell me at the appropriate time, and we'll
Okay.
recognize it at that point in time, so that's okay.
Thank
There are
you.
no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I think it's, Mr. Chairman, I think it's a great idea. I wish we could possibly maybe partner with the schools because maybe having this kind of a program on the front end before these young people arrive in our venue.
Well, I can't speak to Riverdale High School today, but I can in the class of 72 through 76. There was a chess club.
I think there are chess
Of which I
clubs.
was an avid participant.
There are chess clubs in our schools. I don't know if Riverdale still has it, but I do know that there are other
Yeah.
high schools. They don't come right to mind, but I would like to talk with Dr. Sullivan
Yeah.
about and
Yeah.
approach him about this.
So the point being, Doctor, is that we may already have somewhat of an
Okay.
infrastructure to develop out instead of starting from scratch, is what I'm saying. So it may be there, but regardless, to Mr. Mitchell's point, and I'll be brief, all the things that Mr. Mitchell said are quite true. The thing I found most appealing about chess is it helps you think forward. In other words, a successful chess player is the most successful chess player is how many moves in advance they can think. Is it 3 moves, 5 moves, or 7 moves? The better the chess player, the more complexities they are able to deal with regards to the number of moves. And so it helps create strategies and create strategic minds as opposed to being reactive minds. So in any event, we'll get to that a little bit later if necessary. Ms. Duke, you want to talk about open positions?
All right, so we currently still have those 2 part-time educational assistants. We have the 1 full-time temporary position that I mentioned last month, and just to kind of keep an overall idea about things, we have 1 gentleman that's out on military leave and is going to be gone for some time, and we have another employee who's going to soon be out, well, another 2 employees who are soon going to be out on administrative leave. And that is all about.
Any questions for Ms. Duke on open positions? Seeing none, we'll accept the report without objection. Ms. Duke, number 5, the data report, please, ma'am.
Okay, I have provided, as of this morning, it was current on the 9th of January, the information regarding the young people that are currently in the facility. If there are any questions that I can answer, I'll be happy to.
Any questions for Ms. Duke on the data report?
And the dates that are listed here are court dates.
That's correct. And/or a release date, depending upon the individual situation.
Right.
Gotcha.
Any other questions or comments? Sorry?
So we have 13 residents and 4 of Rutherford.
That's correct.
Okay.
Next, seeing no further questions, and without objection, we'll accept the data report. Board of Education Memorandum of Understanding.
So last meeting, I was asked to bring the MOUs for review. There are 2. One is the basic education services, and the second is the supplemental education services. Although he's not at the table, if you have any questions about those, Garland can come up and help us with that.
I have a question. Why is Mr. Garland sitting on the front row instead of sitting at the table?
Well, because we thought this was all going to happen a little later, and we could hit it at the same time, and then
All right.
we got sidetracked.
All right, just trying to bring a little levity to it, that's all. Hope you understand. Do we have any questions about the MOUs or comments?
Once, quickly, once the fiscal year gets a little further on, we'll be getting with the Board of Education and preparing the next fiscal years. But there's rarely any changes to the actual wording of the documents. It's just a calendar year change, mostly.
Thank you. There are no questions or comments, and there is no objection. We'll accept.
Are we required to accept it at this time or just review?
No, I believe, I'm not going to promise, but I think that Ms. Maxwell had asked
Right.
last meeting, could she see the MOUs? And then additionally, they discussed the Edmentum, but we don't contract or have.
Yeah, you don't contract with
And
them.
so that was with the Board of Education.
And so thank you. So there's no acceptance on the part of the board here at this
I
point.
just brought it for
Yeah,
review.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. You're correct in that. So there's no action on the board in this regard at this time. Number 7, annual licensing review and approval.
So last month, I did already have, I believe, our actual letter for licensing approval. But I knew that you would be most interested in the actual report that goes along with it. The report was delayed due to the holidays, but they go hand in hand. So generally what we get every year is this form letter saying that approval for the facility has been granted and the time frame for which it is granted. And then what you have after that is their actual review with the information as to what the monitor did, who they spoke to, what they checked while they were here, and the signatures after that.
Were there any exceptions or problems with the review?
No, there weren't any findings this year. Usually there's not. There was a couple of shower heads that had some hard water buildup on them. We took care of those 2 or 3 while she was still looking at the other rooms. So she mentioned it, but it wasn't an issue for her because we had handled it before she even left the facility.
It's nice to peruse this and see that the kids, the youth, when they were interviewed, their only complaints were the food.
Right, she gets a kick out of that every time. And I think when we have young people, unfortunately, when we have young people that are here that don't have perhaps as much as other young folks, and she asks them about it, they're like, it's great. So on the one hand, that makes me feel better about the food, but then it also touches your heart because, they're just happy to be here and getting 3 meals a day.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is sort of revealing several quoted, treated good, treated well, treated the same, and nice, cool, and they don't holler. So that was, I would think would be a good report.
That is a good report.
That is a very good report.
I have had reviews in the past where they have said, actually, every time she comes, she said, I need to figure out what you're doing and then tell everybody else, because I never have kids come here and say, that they have issues with any of the staff members, and that's not always the case everywhere that she goes. So she's always pleased with the communication and back and forth that the staff have with the kids.
That's impressive.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Then without objection, we will accept licensing review approval. Thank you, Ms. Duke. And number 8, we're back to chess.
Okay.
I want to ask a
Oh,
question
yes.
before we leave this.
Please.
Do we have to accept the annual report, or are you just making the report? Or do we have to formally do something to accept it?
No, it just stands
report.
alone, yes. They come in, that's our annual monitoring. They check our employee files, our kid files, our facility. They interview, make sure they've got checklists, make sure that all is as it should be. And then you either have findings that need to be addressed in a certain time period, or you do not. You could have your license revoked, which we never have, or you could be in queue until they
Resolved it.
Right. So no, they've approved us, and we're good until they do one announced visit and one unannounced visit. So this was our announced visit. We knew they were coming, and then at some time in the next year, they'll show up unannounced and do the same thing.
Okay.
So, thank you for bringing that up, Judge Daniel, and I'm going to make a point of clarification, if I could, about why I'm accepting these reports. The county commission, you're correct, and the county commission routinely accepts reports that they're not required to accept. When you come before the county commission, that report is accepted, and it's not required. And so, but knowing that, I'm trying to follow the model that the county commission has established in just saying publicly, we accept the report. You're correct. It's not necessary, and probably, if I had my druthers, we would all do it correctly, but I'm trying to do it the same way, even though it may be not quite as correct. Does that make sense? So having said that, if this board chooses for us to take the more proper way from a process standpoint, it doesn't matter to the chair. I just want you to know that was my logic behind accepting these reports.
Well, what I was thinking is, and I think that you're doing exactly the right thing, we would like to have knowledge of any reports about the performance.
Oh,
It's the only way
absolutely.
we know how we've got either we're doing good or we're doing
Right.
not so good. So I'd like to have any and all that
Right.
you get. I just didn't know if there was a formality where we had to formally accept it and you had to show that.
Not
in
as far
minutes.
as the
No.
state is concerned, no.
No.
That's all I was asking.
Yeah, the board is not required to accept the report. I just, as the chair, we did because that's what the commission does. So, and again, if the committee, the board determines that we don't need to do that, I'm fine with that. That's not an issue. Okay, back to chess.
All right. And I don't know where,
Mr. Right here.
he's
Rob-
still here.
Rob's fine.
He's welcome to come. He's welcome to come back up here as well. So it was sometime in November when Mr. Mitchell approached us and, laid all the fabulousness that he has shared with you earlier on us. Spoke with Garland a little bit. He said yes, he had seen the movie. We had showed the movie to the kids in the back, and we started talking about it a little bit. We had no idea how much energy Mr. Mitchell has, and it's we're not used to it. We are just simply not used to having somebody so engaged and so ready to do something for this department. So it's taken us, 2 months to figure out that he's serious, and he's not just calling and saying he sure would like to do something nice for the department, because we do get that a lot. He hasn't gone anywhere. He's still here. So that's a good thing. One of the things that we need to talk about moving forward is what this program would currently look like in this facility. And some of the issues and ideas that we need to talk about are, because I don't know all the answers, we're still fleshing it out, is how long the program is, and like, for example, our length of stay. If it's, a 3-month program and our length of stay is 10 days, I would feel horrible obviously we have kids that are here longer than that. That's not what I'm saying. But when he said $10,000, I did not know that was the price tag associated with it. So that sort of took me back a little bit. Our population, the mentors, the volunteers. We have talked a little bit with Mr. Mitchell about this piece of it. And it's things that a lot of people don't really think about, and it is different in adult facilities and juvenile facilities. We would not currently, the way that we handle the back as far as security is concerned, the little pieces and the boards would not work for us. So what we would do is, if we are able to do something like this, it would need to be on some sort of device. Our other option is to, which we have done this in the past, but our other option is to use felt board and felt pieces. And it's just simply, we have, I could give lots of examples and reasons why we do what we do, but those little pieces can get jammed into mechanical locking devices. They can be used to cause self-harm, just so many different things. So we have to think of it a little differently. Now, adults in adult facilities have a greater ability to have those kinds of items in their rooms and available to them on pod. So we would just need to think about making it work for us. We did take a quick poll of the young people at the time, and we were amazed that every single one of them were like, that sounds great. Okay, but now half of those kids that thought it sounded great aren't here anymore, and we don't know about the other half. The other thing that we talked a little bit about is not everybody that's back there is allowed to hang out with everybody else. And so like one person who might be here for a really long time, who might really, really want to do this, may be what we just simply call a group of one and is not able to play chess with anybody. And so I just want us to think big picture and make sure that if we do have these gentlemen put the time and energy and money into this, that then I don't have to be the Debbie Downer and say, well, we can't use.
So let me ask you a question if I can, Lynn, if that's okay. I would prefer the teacher teaching the teacher. In other words, I would like the idea, if we were to pursue this, and I'm not there yet, but if we were to pursue this, the gentleman, what's his name?
Eugene Brown.
Eugene Brown come and speak to these two gentlemen and say, okay, this is how we do it. You can implement this within your guidelines and your processes and your protocols. How do we make this program fit here? Because quite honestly, I can imagine that every facility is structurally different, and so you've got to work it into with the structure that's available, right? And so, I would go to these two gentlemen and to you even more particularly, is this something that you could incorporate yourself into this with Eugene Brown tutoring you guys how to do that within the confines of this facility? Does that make sense? So you kind of, it's instead of having a cookie cutter thing, you kind of take what this, you take an outline and you make it work for what you've got, and that way then you've got some flexibility, yet still getting the attributes of the program.
That's why we are all crossing our fingers about mentors and volunteers, because I've never picked up a chess piece in my life. And I don't think that Mr. Garland has either, and I'm not sure about
See, I'm shocked.
anybody
I'm
else.
stunned that Mr. Garland has not picked up. See, I would have figured him to be at least a chess master, if not working on as being a grandmaster, right?
I was confused when you asked him. I thought there was some foreign language.
So we need some extra bodies in addition to Mr. Mitchell,
Yeah.
because we're
Right.
not worthy.
Is this a program, if we were to do it online and get it on, and kids are very tech savvy, is this something, once they get the basics down with the mentoring, that they could, you said there's some kids that are not supposed to be together,
Right.
but could one be over here in his cell and maybe one be out, and they can still connect and play the game against each other with the device?
Right, maybe.
Or maybe if there's not someone else there, and they're the only one that wants to do it, can they play with someone online on the
Or a
device
computer.
or the computer? Yeah, you understand what I'm
Right.
saying. I see them taking to that more than I would the felt. I think
Right.
the felt would make it feel like it was like a child's game or something. But
That's why the couple of games that we have that were felt, I mean, we explained and they were like, okay, and then they didn't take to the felt, but it's what you have to do, so.
I understand. This seems like it might work and there's possibilities, but like Mayor Carr just said, we've got to see if we can make it work, because our average stay is, 10 days?
It's time for me to recalculate it. I think the last time I did, it was between 12 and 14, but now keep in mind, that's averaging, an hour and 2 years. So there are young people that are here long enough to work a long program, but there are many more who may not be. So,
In a long program being a year, 2 years?
Well, I don't know how long
Again,
the,
that's a definitional issue.
right, like usually it's, I would say, aren't some of ours 12-week programs or, and they don't always get all of it. And so as they discussed last meeting, sometimes you just have to know the kid and say, okay, we're skipping these 3, this kid needs, these 4 weeks, and then try to work around it. But that's not to say that this isn't something that we are excited about. Especially when he said $10,000, I was like, oh my, that's a lot of money. And are we going to have, somebody to volunteer to do this? Because if it's up to me to teach these kids how to play chess,
Well,
then
For those of you if you haven't played chess, I mean, I'll just be candid. It's not a game of luck or chance. There's no luck or chance in the game of chess. It's about skill and logic and critical thinking and being able to think linearly in it. And so those skills, especially with young people, have to be developed. It's not something you're just because you know the movement of the pieces, which you can probably learn within an hour, that doesn't make you a chess player. That means you can move the pieces around. And so I think what we're talking about here is the skills that chess produces in young people, and anybody for that matter, in other areas of their life.
right. I just don't
Those
want me
skills.
to be projecting frustration instead of.
No, I get it. So somebody who is not familiar with the skills of chess would be
Right.
inappropriate to teach those skills that would translate into life skills. So I'm meaning what you're saying. So I think the program has great merit. The question is, how do we get those people who understand chess as a game and understand those strategies involved in doing that? Then it
We
might.
need to clone about 10 of him.
There you go.
I really think we have to evaluate, the population that, going to what you're saying, that we could have these goals met, because if we can only identify maybe 2 or 3 people a year, I mean, you can see the economic return
Yeah.
wouldn't justify the expenditure of the money and, of course, the time
Right.
associated with that. Sounds like a good program, but I think that critical determination would have to be evaluated.
Well, don't let the money part, I'm actively pursuing funding it.
You
myself.
do know there is a new group that's been put together, and I apologize. I'm having a brain fog this morning, and I can't. From the sale of the Middle Tennessee Electric, and there is a group of people that are going to. It's now self-sustaining and are going to start taking some of the, I don't know if the word is dividends, but some of that money and putting it to good causes in the community. And that's the first thing I thought about was this and Manmaker Academy and different things that we've had that you all cannot pay for and that necessarily the county can't pay for. But this group might be able to, even $2,000 would be welcome.
Right.
So I thought we could look into that. And I don't mind doing that on my own, too.
I spoke with Craig Tyndall and with Shane McFarland at City of Murfreesboro, and they wanted to know how their Parks and Rec department could help
That's awesome.
and what they could do to move forward with it. In Canada, they have, when a child becomes involved in the juvenile justice system in Canada, they are sent to chess diversion as their first offense. And they're required to do 25 hours of chess and life skills training. And once they've completed that, they return to the judge and their record is expunged. So they go through a program that's not in the facility, it's done at the university. They're required to get there, attend the class. When they finished it, they've signed off. I'm not sure how long they have to get that 25 hours. But once they've completed the program, their record's expunged, and there's a record that they've gone through it. And you can feel pretty good that if the instructor has signed off on it, they've got the basics of the life skills training that they need to make better, not perfect decisions, because none of us do, but better decisions than they did in the past.
I had just one quick question. I believe last week I was watching the steering committee meeting. They were talking about the opioid settlement money. I don't know the parameters of that, but that might be worth looking into. So roughly $500,000, I believe it is.
Commissioner Harris is quite familiar with those parameters, so.
Okay.
Have you spoken to Commissioner Harris?
No, I haven't.
Well, somebody can reach out and we can make a determination
Okay.
if those funds might be available or if they qualify for this program.
Okay. It was roughly like $500,000 or so, our first.
Yeah, and it's reoccurring.
Our first sell,
Yeah,
yeah.
and we get several tranches through several years.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
I don't know, I don't want to overreach or anything, but I can definitely share the information that you've shared via email with the juvenile court and the juvenile court probation office, and then they can take a look at it as well. I know that they have a lot of new programs that they're going to be restarting. It might be something that they might be interested in as well.
That's a very good idea, because it's a much longer term in which they would be available and under some court supervision. In fact, that's very attractive in comparison with the time in
Yeah.
custody residence, I'm sorry.
Might actually be a better place to start.
Yes, I
Yeah.
think so too. That's a good point.
Why didn't let you
Have
say
you,
anything?
have you spoken to Judge Langford?
I've reached out to him, but I haven't heard back.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Coop.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Sorry, I made
Thank
you
you
come in
so
here for
much.
another.
You're gonna learn some chess, are you, Mr. Garland? Excellent.
Okay, I got to spread out.
All right.
Just so you be knowing.
Number 9, standard operating procedures, which is,
Okay. At some point, I received at least a starting point of some ideas and issues that Ms. Collum wanted to address, and I have given y'all a copy of those issues and the page numbers. And I don't know if we want to start with that or if we want to go down a line, but I am available to.
well, at this point, I think she doesn't know I'm going to do this, but I'm going to recognize Ms. Cullum because I know you have done a lot of work on this, and I appreciate that. And so unless there's an objection, and unless you particularly would rather not to, I'm just going to let you kind of start and kind of lead us forward if that's okay.
That would be fine.
Thank you.
And I would like to say first, these are really issues for discussion.
Right.
If there's a format error or a typo, that can come later. But these are really things I think we need to talk about. And the first one on page 5 is for the organizational chart. I think that you, Mr. Mayor, should be at the top of that. And I'm happy to hear everybody's comments on that, including Ms. Stevenson if she wants to comment.
Scooch that way.
So good morning, good afternoon, I think it is afternoon.
Yeah,
So Ms. Cullum had sent a list of some of the items that she had reviewed in the standard operating procedures, and Lynn and I went through. There's some of them that are specific to the employee handbook, which she and I had discussed, the things that we might need to do that a little bit differently, and how we put it in the SOP, and that's something for this body to decide, but a cleaner, maybe easier way to do it. As far as the organizational structure goes, prior to this board being here, Ms. Duke reported to the juvenile judge. As a result of the board, she is now under the direction of the board. So the thought process is the mayor is the chair of the board, therefore he would be the chair of the organizational structure.
And I don't have a problem with that as the chair, but I would also think it would be appropriate to have the board as part of that structure and diagram as well.
Okay. So do you envision the board and yourself together at the next
Well,
level?
Yes, ma'am, because we're all, in my mind, and I've stated this at our very first meeting, we're all peers. It just so happens I chair, and that is all. I govern the process, but like you have one vote, and I think that needs to be illustrated in the chart. So we would all be listed across the top, if that makes sense.
Like that?
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Okay.
I agree with that. I mean, I think you're right. Board and mayor. that'd be fine.
So the suggestion was from our county attorney that we might, the box that you're speaking of, just put in that box that she reports to the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center Board, and then mayor is chair of this board.
That'd
in
be
the
fine.
box as a whole.
That is fine, unless there's some other objection. I just want to make it very clear, I just don't think it ought to be the mayor or the chair in that box. It's the board that's in that box. Okay, good deal.
And do we want to vote on these as we go along, or just make a list and vote at the end?
I think from a process point, we can go through each one of them as column, and then we can vote on all of them together unless there's an objection, and at which point then we can do it that way.
Let's hear from legal.
Nick, how can we do this? Can we do them all at once, then vote on them, or do we need to do them one at a time?
There's not a legal right along to this. If you're gonna wait until the end, hopefully everybody's agreed on all of them, because if not, we're gonna forget which ones we're changing, which ones we're not. So if you wanna avoid that potential scenario, you might vote as you go.
Then, Mr. Mayor, if you will entertain it, I would move that for the organizational chart that appears on page 5, that above director, there is a box that includes yourself and the Juvenile Detention Center Board.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Would it be fair to say that in the event that there is an issue with the county attorney's office, that he'll say something, or once this is done, do I then need to submit it to Nick per usual?
I am not following you at all.
Okay.
For the approval of SOPs.
So oftentimes with other boards and procedures, there's policies that are not my purview. You guys are the policymakers, you make the policies, and then they'll be put in writing, and oftentimes they're subject to county attorney review, just for legal form or substance. I don't change any
Right.
county policy, I don't want a piece of that, so if that's everybody's understanding, Lynn just wants confidence the lawyers looked at it.
No.
So if there's anything wrong, she can point at me.
That's people.
Well, no, I'm generally asked by public safety, has the county attorney taken a look at this? And when I say no, then they ask
Right.
me to funnel it through. So that's the only reason.
Nick, would you like to come sit at the table with us? I got a feeling you're going to be asked several questions. Thank you.
Procedurally wise, I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be better to just go down these, and if there is some contest about them, do those individually, and then at the end of this, just approve all of them at one time.
I'll take that as a motion.
Okay.
Do we have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's exactly what I had in mind, Mr. Vice Chair. Thank you. So we'll go through these, and then if we get to one where we have significant discussion or objection, we can take that one separately. Okay? Ms. Cullen?
Yes, the next item would be on page 6. This will be the last bullet point. Language here says, this department prohibits dating, romantic, intimate, or affectionate relationships between fellow employees, subordinates, and detainees. And I believe this is different than the language that is in the county employee handbook.
So one of the suggestions to help assist with these type things that are in the SOP that are also part of our personnel policy is that if it brings up the clause that there's something specific to her department, she puts that in there and then refers the balance back to the employee handbook. Because as we make amendments to the handbook, that way she's not having to bring forth a new handbook every time we update the handbook and then having to take it to the.
So are you saying that we should reference the employee handbook here instead of stating this, and that you want to reflect the employee handbook? I guess I'm not.
What I'm saying initially is I'm wondering why this is different than the employee handbook.
Initially, and there are going to be several places, as she just talked about, where I took items from the handbook and inserted them into the SOP. And then, as with this specific example, this has been an issue in the past, and it was something that I felt strongly about. And although it is with Code of Ethics, that bullet point was something that we at the time felt like was necessary to be stated in the SOP.
So how does this particular bullet point differ from the employee handbook?
It's not in there.
Oh, it's not in there?
I believe employee handbook
Not-
says they strongly
Discourage
discourage.
it.
Okay.
And so,
So this is a more detailed explanation of what's prohibited, correct?
Says prohibited.
Well, okay, yes. Mine is prohibit, theirs is discourage.
Huh? That would be a lot different.
It's a lot different, yeah. Yeah.
So, Ms. Cullenmeyer, are you advocating that we reflect the employee handbook here in discouraging, or?
I guess my position would be is if this document's going to be different, that it would need to be described as different and given a reason, and I'm not certain, is the SOP approved by the mayor, by the county commission? Okay. And so they've approved that change in the past.
and so what she could do is she could refer the Code of Ethics to the employee handbook and say, and this, I'll defer to Nick for this, with the exception of item XYZ. And the reason why the county discourages and she prohibits, the county's looking at it globally. You know, if we've got 2 employees in a department, it might not be as big of a deal depending on the department and what they do. If somebody, and I don't want to throw out another department, but department XYZ, 2 employees in that department, while it would not necessarily be ideal, it would not be prohibited unless one had supervisory authority over the other. Wherein lies the issue is if they get married, then you end up with 2 vacations, or there's a squabble, then there's a fight, you know, so those things. So I can completely understand.
We have offered in the past, when it has come up, arrangement with, when we can, it's not always, but we had a situation that came up where 2 people met at our department, the best thing ever. We realized that it was a potential issue as far as the policy was concerned, and they, between themselves, because the workhouse was working very closely with us, they said, we'll take a female or a male. The employees got to choose. The female said, I'll go. The female went to the workhouse, and the male stayed here. So there are options to continue employment with the county if there is a position open. If there's not, then that's when I have a problem.
Nick, may I ask a question? Sure. The employee handbook says discourages. This SOP says prohibit. Is there a reason, legal reason, why this SOP can't say prohibit?
I'll have to look at that and get back to everybody.
Is that a question we should be asking?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. You guys ultimately will approve the SOPs. I mean, that's your
Well,
job.
and the fact that we've got a stricter standard here that doesn't reflect in,
There's still county government employees, aren't
that's
there?
my point.
So, you know, if uniformity amongst the different departments is a good thing, but I mean, there might be other reasons expressed here that having them different might be okay. I just gotta think about it and report back.
If you don't mind,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
let me,
Please.
let me jump in here, because I think what you have here is advantageous because particularly as it gets down here to the detainees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the subordinates.
Yeah.
I just think that should be prohibited. And there's good justification for it because of the uniqueness of the operation and their minority.
I'm in agreement with everything you said. I just want my positions, I want to make sure we're on pretty solid legal ground. I'm sorry?
Oh, gotcha.
I mean, if there are gonna be a lot of changes that are gonna depart from the SOP, one other option would be to, not that it's required, I think this board has purview over this SOP, but you could just get the commission to similarly approve it as recommended by y'all. So that the commission has approved its regular set of employee policies, but it's also acknowledged the approval of these SOPs, although that's not required.
So, going another thing deeper, where our employee handbook has language in there that this supersedes all other policies and all over. So we may need to amend that statement to say unless otherwise approved by the commission, and hers might need to say our code of ethics supersedes the county's code of ethics policy, in that you could not make it less stringent, you could only make it more stringent. So we would need to amend that in ours, right?
Yes, but I want to caveat this with, if there's going to be a lot of these, you're going to start getting a really funky, wonky, cross-referencey.
Exactly.
It might be hard to keep up with, so just keep that in mind going forward.
Thank you.
Ms. Stevenson, are there other segments of county government that have this same standard, the prohibition?
Oh, it's in, when it's in the handbook, it's every
No,
department.
what's in the SOP,
Oh,
where the relationships are prohibited? Are there other departments
Like
that
the
do
sheriff's
that?
<clears throat>
department?
so the sheriff's office, we have three departments that have their own handbook, and that's the sheriff's office, the property assessor, and the register of deeds.
Those are constitutional offices.
Offices.
Sure.
Right. I think the sheriff's office policy is the same as the county's policy. I'm not aware, because when I went through the sheriff's office policy, there's only like a couple of little caveats that were unique to the sheriff's office, and that, I do not recall that being one of them, and I do not recall that being, different in the property assessors. I cannot recall Ms. Dahlbarn's at all. I'd have to go back and look at hers.
Nick, let me ask, because we're dealing with juveniles underage, isn't going to Vice Chair Daniel's point, inference anyway, that the stricter policy is advantageous because of the fact we have a number of children here?
That is a policy decision to which I would agree with you with, is take my lawyer hat off, I would think so. Yeah.
We could add too, because y'all are making me think about other things now, and we are actively reviewing the employee handbook. We might need to add in the code of ethics policy for the county handbook, because you've got the correctional work center does not allow, the sheriff's office and the correctional work center does not allow their employees to have romantic relationships with their
Currently
their
detained.
current detainees,
Mhm.
up to 2 years past that. So it may be that if we're, in order to not get too wonky, as Nick says, we may just need to add that if you are in an operation that deals with detainees or those individuals incarcerated, is against the county's policy to have, because that is not allowed.
Well, and to me, it's two issues. The relationships with
Detainees,
employees
yeah.
and detainees is clearly, should never happen. But the difference between the county policy and this has to do with the dating between employees.
Correct.
That everyone would be an adult and working for the county. So I don't know.
So,
I'm for this particular provision here. I'm for it, even if it varies with the county.
so.
So
Nick-
shall we give him some time to research
Yes.
that?
Yes.
What am I researching? Sorry.
Could you call it a different name instead of code of ethics, and then it doesn't
Just
conflict?
move it to a different SOP.
Yeah, just say
That
don't
way
call
you're
it
not
code of
conflicting
ethics,
your code of
just,
ethics at all, it's just its own standalone SOP within this department.
just call it relationships with coworkers and detainees.
Okay.
And then you
Lynn?
avoid that.
Okay.
Is that,
So
did
what might
did
have
the
to
board,
happen-
did the board understand that? Because we're going to take that up as,
If that gets approved, then what probably should happen with a lot of these is, Lynn, she drafts, this is her book, right? I mean, you do a lot of those, so maybe
Right.
you draft a proposal and send it to me, and then I can look at it for legal form.
Okay.
Just change the topic to prohibited conduct.
just drop it out of this.
Yeah, just move it out of code of ethics.
Relationships or whatever, yeah. Interpersonal relationships.
And this is a pretty long document, there might be
There's going
another
to,
section
there's
in-
going to be other, similar issues, if I can like I'm
Get there.
seeing something happening here, and there's going to be several of these type issues. So,
Thank you, Nick.
Yes, sir.
Is the board, are we all in agreement on it, so we can move to the next item?
Yes.
Excellent.
So let
I want, on this one, I want to make sure.
Yes, let's restate what we're doing.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you. You wanna restate what we're
Well,
doing?
my understanding that the board would say, for this last bullet point, this would drop off section 1-03 and become a standalone section for the Juvenile Detention Center standard operating
And it
procedures.
would be called prohibited
I don't know.
conduct?
Not,
can I take that?
can you give us a little bit of license with it, because
Yeah.
I gotta look at it and compare it, but it'll
And
be
there-
something along those lines, Judge.
There may be another spot that it would fit, so I don't want to.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Excellent.
And whatever happens, I mean, we'll report back to the board.
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
You, then them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
On the ones that we are discussing, okay.
Correct, yes. This will throw off section numbers possibly, we have to alter that. We'll see about that.
If you add it to the end,
There you go.
it should work. Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Cullen.
Next issue.
Number 3.
Page 9.
Does it need to be done as a motion or?
Well,
We're gonna wait till
we're
the
going to
end.
take all these up at the end that we've agreed on, so thank you.
And this is very similar to the previous comment. This employee complaint procedure is a policy that appears in the employee handbook for the county employees, but this SOP has language that's in addition, and I've highlighted it on my copy.
And I have different forms from Human Resources. My complaint forms read differently than the ones from Human Resources.
And that's been approved by county commission.
Yes.
I'll take, when we get done with this one, I need to say something. Thank you.
So, I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up here. Those paragraphs and the underlying provisions, you say are different than the county commission?
Yes, there's language in the SOP that does not appear in the county employee handbook.
What do you say?
I say, I say I like my employee complaint procedure, and I can explain why if necessary, but if an easy way to do this is to rename it or to pull out, leave, I think what had been discussed with Mr. Hennessy was anything that is exactly as it reads in the employee handbook, just say, reference the code of, or the employee handbook, which I'm happy to do that. That's great. And then anything that is different, specific to me, unless the board is not comfortable with why it's different, then I would like to keep it, call it something else, and keep trucking. The reason, just for history purpose, that this department's complaint procedure is more stringent, in my opinion, than Human Resources, because I have very young employees fresh out of college who like to complain if things don't go exactly their way. And sometimes they don't understand that we can have a conversation amongst ourselves and work something out, and it doesn't have to go to so far as that an employee may be disciplined because of it when they could have worked it out between themselves. So I have tried in perhaps a over-exaggerated way to walk them through almost with check marks on my form. Did you talk to them? Did you talk to their supervisor? What did they say? So that as their brain is reviewing this form and saying, no, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that. No, I didn't do that. Maybe this isn't what I need to do. Maybe I need to go. I'm trying to separate discussions that adults can have and resolve something with a real complaint that administration needs to become involved in. And this was the way that we chose to do it at the time.
So is this a form of ADR?
I don't know what
Alternate
ADR,
dispute resolution?
potentially.
Okay.
You could call it that.
Just call it ADR.
Yeah, just call it, or DR, dispute resolution.
I mean, the reason I say alternate is because, and I understand what's being said here. I mean, every dispute doesn't rise to the level of complaint. And I think it's great for us to have another channel to resolve it. So either dispute resolution or alternate dispute resolution, whichever one.
And that's part of, in the policy, in going to the person who you feel like has treated you inappropriately, so you can have that conversation. I don't like it when, I don't like it when you put your hand on my shoulder. That makes me feel uncomfortable. Please don't. Or, whatever. That's the whole purpose of going to the individual. But it does take it a step further in going through to make sure. And then in the last line on here, while it's worded in this way that, a false allegation, I mean, when you create a complaint form, that is an official government document, and falsifying an official government document can lead to termination. So in the fact that she's added that in here, while it doesn't say that in our handbook, I don't think it's the last sentence in that, we do have in the handbook that falsifying an official government document, may lead to termination. So that in and of itself doesn't change anything, her just adding that. But calling it something like a alternate dispute resolution may help your issue there.
Yeah, because
Or maybe you
yeah.
would use the term dispute resolution procedure. You start this way,
And
and
then if
that'd
it
be a separate
rises to-
section. If that doesn't work out, then you go with the actual formal complaint. But before you get to formal complaint, you gotta do this first. Can it be handled that way?
I would love to.
Can legally, is there anything?
I'll have to get back to you if I got any issue. This is a lot to take in, so I'm just listening, but if there's any legal ramification for this, I'll be sure to bring it back to the board. But
Well,
I
and
say
I'm
move forward as
concerned,
planned.
I'm concerned that you look at, so if I work here, I have to do things that if I work in another part of county government, I don't have to do. So
Well, maybe
the need,
the whole county's dispute resolution should follow that procedure.
Maybe.
she's got a policy on it. She may have it.
Maybe, it may be that we can add that as, we'll look at it, obviously.
Yeah, the way I look at like the county government-based personnel policies, that's what they are. That's what's passed, they're base personnel policies. Your other departments, I don't know, do they have SOPs like this?
Some do,
I'm not
uh-huh.
talking about the sheriff's office or anything, but like planning, engineering, pause, any of them have any of their own SOPs? Well, those other offices have their own SOPs that vary from the base personnel policies. Now, those constitutional officers will oftentimes simply adopt what the county has, but that's not always the case. They have changed them. Again, there's got to be a little bit of flexibility here, I think, considering the circumstances of her department being of unique nature. With the other planning and engineering and those other sort of more innocuous departments, they're dealing with, customers on a daily basis who are paying for a permit fee. They're not dealing with incarcerated juveniles. And so some of this stuff is maybe necessary for orderly administration and have legitimate penological objectives associated with them. So I think there needs to be a little bit of flexibility with that. And again, if there's a number of these changes that are concerning getting commission approval of the SOPs, once you've got them all finalized, kind of moots it, because the commission has said, all right, we're going to have a set of these personnel policies in the county government handbook for these employees, but for the juvenile detention center, it's these. And mind you, before this board was created, I'm pretty sure you ran these through at some point and got commission approval. So these are, I think with that in mind, that sort of background, the commission's already said that they're okay with these being a little bit different because they've approved them.
I have a question, not just regarding this issue, but just moving forward. As a practical matter, HR has a employee manual, and as long as the standard operating procedure of the Juvenile Detention Center is not lower than the employee manual, they can make it more stringent in some cases, can they not?
Correct.
And they have the flexibility, or this board has the flexibility to do that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so I think that's what the board's trying to, at least that's what I'm hearing, is that, okay, here's the floor on employee conduct. Some departments can put in stricter behavioral standards that.
Of course, we want to be careful to treat everybody equal. I think Ms.
Sure, and that's what I'm hearing.
But as long as we're not disparately treating
Yeah.
people differently based on discriminatory
Yeah.
or other unlawful reasons, there might be, there's rational basis here to go ahead and maybe deal with this department a little bit differently.
Okay. And so on this particular one, you're going to look into this one and get back to us, is that correct?
I'll work with Lynn on
That'll be
it.
perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Before we go any further, because I love this, so thank you for all your work. But I think it'd be great, and I know others have looked at the SOP as well, and we're going in somewhat of a chronological order, are we not? It seems to be, Ms.
Yes.
Cullum?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're just, okay, if any board members have an issue with the SOP, let's assume for a second she jumps now to page 15, but Dr. McDonald, you have an issue with something on page 12 or 13, please speak up so we can let's just do this in chronological order if that's okay. Sure. And I'll just continue on Ms. Cullum to kind of lead the charge in this regard, but if there's something, and so we can just stay in somewhat of a chronological order, that keeps us somewhat on task in an organized way. So Ms. Cullum, thank you.
So,
So I want to jump in then, because you passed the page.
Please, thank you.
You're gonna work on this.
I want to go back to page 8,
Okay, we're on page 8 now, thank you.
and this is dealing
I'm sorry, we
with
can't go back.
rules of conduct, and it follows a list of items which are deemed sufficient cause for corrective action. And it goes on page 8, it says inappropriate use of county cell phones. I think I know what that means, but does that need to be defined? And it also says being a member of a subversive group. Does that need to be defined?
I think this will be
Exactly.
one of the ones that it's the same, and so then I will just refer to the handbook, so that would,
Okay. So this would just be a pointer to the employee handbook? then?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we need to say that somewhere as defined?
yes, I'm going to be, as we go through this, I'm making notes, and I'm going to, even the ones that Ms. Collum isn't discussing that I know is straight from the Rutherford County Employee Handbook, I'm going to make a statement that refers it because it is exactly the same.
And as I went through, anything that was exactly the same, even if I have an issue with it, I know this is not the group to address that too.
And as I told Ms. Coleman, I think we had a conversation, I said if there are suggestions, you might think of something we haven't considered, that please send that to me while we're in this active process, so then Eric and Nick and myself can all discuss that and say, is this the appropriate place for this, or does it need to be somewhere else, maybe in your handbook?
Okay, that's a good answer for my question. Okay, before we go to 12, then I want to go to 10, page 10. The question I had here is two. First of all, is there a performance evaluation of all employees annually?
No, sir.
Okay.
So Rutherford County does not require it. However, our minimum standards that we additionally are under does require it. I spoke to the state, and while our department was involved in litigation, we put a pause on that, and we are now revamping and doing those evals once again.
On what basis, annually? Or?
Yes,
Okay.
so like right now, probably not every, because we've gotten some are filtering through, but the majority of our employees are due annual reviews currently right now.
Okay, so that, and does this cover that?
So this is,
And one of the things I say is, are you covering all of them or just part of them? And if you're not covering all of
this,
them, how do you
this
justify
does
it?
not address the annual reviews. This section, this corrective action is what would be referenced in an annual review.
Do we have an SOP on the annual review of employees?
I don't have it in the SOP except for the statement somewhere in the beginning where I say all of the, oh, Nick helped me with that, all of the,
Nick's giving you- you're on your
it
own
says
here.
the Tennessee Department of Children's Services minimum standards for juvenile detention centers and the number are incorporated by reference into the Rutherford County Juvenile Detention Center SOP as if copied verbatim. So that is.
That's your reference.
That's my reference. And I also do have that similar statement for the employee handbook, but just because of what we've just talked about, I'm still gonna go through, like, from code of ethics, make a statement and kill it and move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Last question on this page. We're talking about written warnings for the employees, and you say that that goes in their personnel file. How long do you keep them in the personnel file?
We keep them forever, but they are only reviewable for the past year, I believe is.
Depending on the situation, in most cases, if somebody makes a mistake and you counsel them and they don't repeat that, I mean, you know, you're not gonna.
But it's still in their record.
It stays in their record forever, but it's only as a reference at that point, so. If you give somebody a final warning and for 5 years they have great behavior and nothing happens, obviously, if they have too many tardies, you wouldn't wanna fire them because they got a final warning 5 years ago,
Okay.
so.
I'll defer back to you because my next one passes.
Corrective actions,
Page 12.
This additionally has language, at the last paragraph does not appear in the county handbook. I don't know what to make of that, but I just wanted to point it out.
Is there a reason, Ms. Duke, why we included this second paragraph, or Ms. Stevenson, why it is not included in the employee handbook? Why the difference? I mean, sometimes there is no explanation, and that's fine, but I think we're asking.
Yes.
If there is, what is it?
This may have been when, this is what I suspect. There will occasionally be statements in what I believe to be the correct part of the handbook that were referenced in the either minimum standards or the handbook that is required in minimum standards to be in your policy and procedures. And I just more recently had the discussion with Nick where he said, let's do that little paragraph that says it is part of it, and so that I don't have to put each little thing. And so this may have been a leftover, let's call it, from when I was having to take pieces and parts of that original.
He said just.
So Lynn, you referring to page 5, that
Yes.
paragraph where
Yeah.
you incorporate by reference the TCI minimum
Right.
standards. And I mean, looking at that paragraph that Ms. Combs highlighted, not really substantive, doesn't really add anything, so you probably just delete it.
Yeah, and that's, as we're going and I'm making notes, and it's something that is covered by that little paragraph or whatever,
catch-all.
the little catch-all. Or if we change something or say it's okay to keep but move it, that's what I'm doing, and then I'm going to bring the next best thing back and say this incorporates all of the things that we discussed.
So if I understood, Nick, you're saying this paragraph may be unnecessary because of page 5, and if so, we can delete this paragraph.
So yes, sir.
Okay? Did everybody understand that? Great, thank you.
I'm trying to help Ms. Todd. Is she trying to keep up with this, and is she able to decipher what we've agreed to here?
Well, I'm gonna be real interested to see how y'all make these motions to include all of these and remember what you. But I also have the recording that I'll go back and listen to.
Thank you, Ms. Todd.
May I submit something? So
Please.
you're gonna have your recorder here who does have the recording, and so her minutes will be very helpful to everybody here. And then we'll shoot for next month, but obviously if we're still working, it might take longer, but maybe we bring back the revised versions for final approval so that you all see them.
Okay.
And that it's not just we're running with it, trying to figure out, if we got it right or not.
Excellent point. And so, and not to overburden you, Nick, and your staff and Ms. Todd, but if that could be made available 1 week to the board, to the committee, 1 week prior to the next meeting, so they could be reviewed, so then we could talk about it in review at the next board meeting. Again, if that's not too onerous.
We will get, we'll, as much as we can, we get.
Right, and so, that's right, and so do as much as you can with the time that you have, and we'll go through that part of it. This is somewhat of a painstaking process, but that may be a way to move things forward a bit. Okay? And without objection, that's what we'll do. Ms. Cole?
Yes.
Or anybody else. Again, we're going to try to do these in somewhat of a chronological order. So your guidance.
Okay.
Next.
Page 14, the last line, and I think this change needs to be made throughout the document, and I can probably tell you everywhere. That needs to be photo lineups. I've verified with local law enforcement, that's what we're talking about. We're
Physical lineups.
correct. We're not doing that, and never gonna. So, and that's an easy one, and it's several places, and I'll figure out where those things are. Okay.
Is that also on page 15? You have that highlighted?
Yes, page 15, that last line, contacts on-call administration for magistrate calls. I would like to see a little more explanation about what the magistrate call is and when it's triggered.
Okay.
And that may be in some other memo or something.
I would like, I hear you and I'm on board with that. And I do think there's a better place to do that, but for post orders, which just generally speak to the person who's manning that post, if we could keep it simple there and more detailed.
So can we say contacts on-call administration for magistrate calls pursuant to, so that someone who reads this knows where to go to figure out what that is?
Yes.
Will that work?
Lynn, would you rather have parentheses for further details, see section,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah?
Well, I don't care.
However, whatever you want,
Okay.
but if I pick this up and don't know what magistrate calls are, yeah.
Any objection? Excellent.
Page 16, last line. Ensures all time restraints are accurate, and this is another, I'm not familiar with what the time restraints are.
Okay, so time restraints are going to be, time restraints are to make sure that they're hitting their court date within the time that is allotted per TCA. So it's shorthand for people who know what that means. So I can change it to
You could put it in the definitions or reference it back to something.
clean up and reference.
Okay, so are we gonna?
She's gonna reference.
Okay. And let me get clear, what were we gonna do on the magistrate calls? You're gonna reference that to another document?
Yes, I will. I believe probably in the intake area, because I think Judge Daniel had mentioned another area where, and that's just my memory, okay? But I think that he took issue with some wording in an area that would fit very nicely in.
next one's 21. Do we have anything between now and?
I'm on 21 too, so
Okay.
we both.
Okay.
Good.
On page 21, about the middle of the bullet points, prepares, issues juvenile petitions. Is that employee still doing that?
No, that needs to be
All right,
removed.
so you, and don't anticipate them coming back to that?
No,
Now, where are you located?
It's about the middle of the bullet points,
Conducts probable cause.
prepares, issues juvenile petitions.
Yeah, and I would remove.
And she says that employee is no longer doing that function and they're gonna drop that bullet out.
Okay,
Yes.
well, I'd drop out the last two in that section too.
Yes, that's the last one, definitely, and then, yes, you're correct.
Both of those.
And actually, the, everything from prepare/issues on down was part of that hat that he wore at that time. So all of those bullet points can come out.
And then just pick up with biweekly.
Yes.
So
Okay.
from the one with
Says
Ms. Cullum
It
mentioned all the way
ends
down.
with STD program and then goes to bi-weekly.
Start back at bi-weekly.
Yes.
Excludes from, it's included is review STD
Yes.
for compliance. Rest excluded until you start with bi-weekly. and it
Yes.
goes back to- Okay.
I'm cheating from Ms. Cullum's notes over here to make sure that nobody has
Copying my
anything before we
homework.
get to 37. Yeah, I am copying your homework. You're a good student. Does anybody have anything before we get to page 37?
I do on 23. And I'm sure this is pretty well explained, but what is PREA?
That is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. So this particular position is our designated PREA coordinator. And PREA stands for Prison Rape Elimination Act. And we will be having a PREA audit sometime at the end of this calendar year. So you are going to learn all about it.
Well, is that defined somewhere? Is that acronym just be out there?
Yeah, this might be the first place that it is brought up. And I don't know.
If it is the first time, you could just spell it out and put pre in parentheses.
Okay.
Or drop it in definitions.
It's a federal statute, statutory scheme.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
Do you always keep it so cold in here?
I'm still hot.
My
I'm so
toes,
sorry.
Oh, we get hotter slugs in here.
You and her are the only two hot ones in here. I'm over
First
here going,
Baptist Church on Christmas Eve.
I'm not cold-natured at all.
and Nick is zipping up his jacket.
Are you froze over there?
I can turn it up.
No. We'll suffer too. Maybe this will keep our meeting short.
there'll be no sleeping in this session. You will not be.
Exactly. What do we have next? I have
37.
37. Anybody have anything before 37? Okay, 37.
Right.
I think we have two, both Judge Daniel, both you, Ms. Cullivan.
Yes, okay, so on the schedule, 8 a.m. begins school groups per policy. Is that 7-07? And maybe you could reference.
Okay, reference
That-
policy.
Yeah.
Yes. And then begins recreation groups per policy. Is that 7:10?
17. Probably, regardless of what it is, I can
right here and right
definitely
here.
reference it.
8,
So if you're looking for those, you can find them.
What page is that?
37.
Yes.
Okay.
What did you say?
So it will, school groups are per 7-07, and recreation groups are 7-10.
Judge, you had something, didn't you, on 37?
Not on 37. No, I'm good on that.
I thought you did. Paul.
43, I've got something on 43.
Why don't you go first then?
Yeah.
Give somebody else a chance. You're doing great. Thank you very much.
My question on 37,
37 or 43?
I'm sorry, 43, 3.01. What are the staff drug screen results maintained and for how long?
Again, they're maintained in the Human Resources Department. They're separate from a personnel file because they're HIPAA compliant, and they're maintained forever.
And they're not out here?
No, no, sir.
Okay.
This will potentially, I don't know, because I don't have the handbook memorized, but this could potentially be one of the ones that will reference the employee handbook, and that this will not all be.
Yes, and my only comment was about performance review requirements, and Ms. Stevenson emailed me, we don't do those. That was
Which
my
that will,
question.
that will have to be pulled out.
Because you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other question I had on this page is, why, and there's probably a good reason for this, we maintain personnel records on volunteers.
That's a minimum standard.
That's a federal law.
Okay.
We do.
If you work with
on all the
children.
volunteers that work in the county, but specifically because they're working with children, you want a background check
Sure.
on those individuals and a drug screening and all those type things. You don't want them
Makes
having access to your young
Yeah.
people.
And there's two different categories of volunteers. One's a volunteer and one's a partner.
Right, and
And the
that,
difference is explained here, but seems the difference without the distinction, just amount of number of hours.
it was a requirement in minimum standards that if it was this, then more was required, and if it was less, and I wrote it out because I don't want to have to keep looking it up, and I can't remember.
Okay. Makes sense. So,
Is it my turn again?
Yep, you're up.
Sorry.
No.
Okay, all right. So, are we ready for page 44?
So did you, you said did you have anything on 43?
I just wanted to know about the county.
Oh, okay.
Performance reviews. And the county's not doing it, but detention is, and she's
And I'm
gonna
going to pull
make
it
that
out,
clear.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So,
44?
all right. So, positive drug screens will result in immediate termination. I understand that may be appropriate for this part of county government, but that is very different than the county employee handbook.
Ours, if you get a positive result, you're terminated. I don't know where you saw that was different. If it is, I need to know that because I misstated because.
This would be an opportune time to review that, wouldn't it?
There is a review by medical, but still, if medical says, okay, it's still positive,
Yeah.
then.
By law, we have to have a medical review officer who, so to give you an idea of how the drug screening takes place, let me just
Oh,
start there.
I've been drug screened by the county. Very familiar with that.
But we use a third-party agency to do that, and then the doctor, who is the medical review officer, is the one that reviews, so,
They could be prescribed to it, or there's a reason why they have the medication. It's a controlled narcotic.
But that wouldn't be positive.
right, so a positive, just because it says positive on the result, that's probably why the handbook says may be terminated, is because a positive result doesn't mean that you're,
If factually you tested positive for a narcotic, but under the policy, it's not positive for termination.
right.
like if it's prescribed.
Correct.
Right, and so even a prescription, like, they can tell on a prescribed medication if the person's over-medicating, and that is a positive result. But once the medical review officer reviews it, if they're within compliance with what the doctor has prescribed, then it returns to us as a negative. So initially, it's a positive, MRO reviews it, and then it either comes back a positive or a negative, so that's why, if that makes sense. But-
Well, on page 14 of the county handbook, they go, and 15 and 16, they go through all the things that you have to do if someone is tested positive, the referral to employee assistance and things like that.
Well, the referral to EAP is only if they pre-notify, we don't send them through the EAP if they test positive.
just talking to Lynn, I think it's probably gonna be one that will be stricken and it will refer to the employee handbook.
Okay, perfect.
That's what takes care of
Yes,
that.
yeah.
Okay.
That was really my issues.
The whole thing, the page
Is that right,
44?
Lynn?
Yeah, because the county has a.
I need to
Yeah.
make sure that it really, anything that we're talking about, if it is word for word, I'm gonna reference, however I'm gonna do the page 5 reference
Right.
or whatever.
Right. But if there are certain things that you need.
Right, I just don't know, I can't, I don't
can't
remember,
read the-
I don't have it memorized, so.
right now. So I think that's the plan, but then of course this is all gonna come back to you guys to look at.
So we're going to mark that Nick will research whether this can just reference county policy.
You throw Sonia and Lynn in that statement?
Yes. It's fine.
Tag team it.
Well, she's right. Page 45, what's P and P?
Where are we?
Right in the middle of the
Oh,
page.
yeah.
Purpose of operating the P and P.
Oh, policy and procedure.
Should it be SOP?
Ms. Duke,
Should it be SOP?
I'm looking, hang on a second.
that's fine, too.
The purpose and operating, yes, SOP. That was wording from minimum standards.
Okay.
And that was my comment as well. So,
Okay, on page 46, I said, where is the documentation of this training located?
And if you're talking about the CPR and first aid, that's in employees' training files, which is separate from their other files. I have training, medical, and employment files.
Okay, so the Judicial Detention Center will maintain records on specific training, including credit hours completed by each juvenile detention center staff member. And those are in your office?
Do y'all not send all those up to HR?
Well, we do, but you know, I'm old and I want to keep paper copies until the cows come home. So they're both.
We maintain it for them as well.
Okay. So it's located in both places?
We send them to HR when the employee terminates or resigns or whatever. I don't know. Well, he might be sending it regularly too.
Well, and one of the things that we've got some new software in human resources that we've been rolling out over the last couple of years, and now we're into the training phase. So our long-term goal is that departments like Lynn's, who does regular training, is that this be done electronically through this system, and when the employee gets through the training, it automatically goes into their file, and then we just generate a report for Lynn when she needs it. But we're in the process of doing that now, so that will come over time.
But will that be our department-specific items too? Ooh.
That's the goal.
So that would sort of
Yes.
obviate.
It would streamline it for you, and they do it all online, from their computer.
Yeah.
Because computers work wonderful, so long as they work. But then when they don't work, you're going back to
Power
that,
goes down, you're in trouble.
yeah, with that hard copy.
I hear you.
It's coffee hour, I think.
There's some over there.
All right, we were interrupted there. Judge, where are we? We were on,
52.
So I thought we were on.
did we
You
get,
said
four-
something about 46.
did we get 46 done?
I think we got it done.
Yeah, we should.
Okay.
Remember what?
What did we do?
It was training, where the training was.
Oh, where's the training? Okay, gotcha, okay.
If Mr. Broden and Mr. Hennessy would like a cup of coffee, we're sharing.
Or Danny?
That's right, excuse me, my goodness. Anyway,
All right. Okay, for page 52, this is part of staffing and leave. This may be another policy that can just be referenced to the employee handbook. The issue I bumped on was page 52, that last bullet, employees who are expected to be off from work. It's probably just a typo, I think, in the county handbook. On the second line, it's an and instead of an or. I think you would have to have done both of those things, and here it's an or.
Oh, yes.
So probably just a typographical error.
Well, actually, it's one of those technicalities. So legally, it's 1,250 hours in the last 12 months. So it could be a rolling calendar, not a calendar year. So they could have worked in another department, not worked for the county for 2 or 3 months, and then picked up with Lynn and still have 1,250 hours in the last 12 months. So maybe it does need to stay as an or. Does that make sense?
Then you
Need to change the other one.
just
That's right.
make them consistent would
I'm
be my
gonna,
request.
if it's
Yes,
in the other
yeah.
thing, I'm killing it.
Okay,
I need to look at that.
okay.
Thank you.
So Sonia will check on.
Definitely, okay.
Photo ID. Where is it on here?
Are we ready for page 59?
It appears so.
This would just be another addition of the word photo in front of the term lineup.
Got
Where is
it.
that located again?
That's top of page
Top of the
59.
first one.
And Sonia, since this references requests coming to your department, are the requests for the photo lineups coming to your department, or is
Yes.
detention just handling this?
She's
Well,
also the records custodian.
Okay,
Right.
Kind of, I mean, she's the county's records
I'm
custodian.
the coordinator.
Coordinator.
I probably did not word that well enough. The form came from HR. And so what happens is if it is just a normal photo lineup, then I have them fill out the form, give their ID, go through all the proper steps, and then I keep that on file in because there are some records requests that for our department that do funnel through HR and some that don't. And so we maintain the photo lineups with all of that information unless there's something unusual about it and it needs to attach to something else. And then it would additionally, or it would go to HR.
And we do all the, so being the records coordinator, and it's for the entire county, so all the record requests, with the exception of any of the constitutional officers that wants to have their own unique policy. So all of the departments, everybody but the Register of Deeds office, I handle all of the employee-related records requests, okay? So Ms. Dahlbarn handles hers, but everybody else in the county wants me to handle theirs, all the other constitutional officers. And then, as far as operational type things, Ms. Dahlbarn handles hers. Ms. Harrell, Circuit Court Clerk, handles her operational stuff. Ms. Kroll handles her operational stuff, and Mr. Mitchell. But now the sheriff's office and everybody else sends all of their records requests through us. So we get it as a coordinator, we send it to the respective, and so like the sheriff's office has different people slotted to handle different records. They're the coordinators for that particular thing, and they'll send them back. We just approve the redacting so that confidential information is not accidentally released. So, that makes sense?
so really what this is referencing is you're using her form.
Correct.
It's not that she's coming down here
Correct.
and setting up the photo
And I
lineup.
have a note to make that read
Okay.
better.
All right.
We're ready for 65.
Okay, in the second bullet, where it says, if any equipment needs repair, the sergeant shall submit a work order to the administrative assistant, and a copy of the work order shall be forwarded to juvenile detention.
That's kind of like an all email so that if you report it to Ms. Sheila saying the shower in B7 is out, I don't report it, she doesn't report it, he doesn't report it, so that everybody knows that issue has been reported.
Is there a clearer way to say
Yes.
that? I mean, that makes a lot of
Yes.
sense to me, okay. So you all are maintaining a log of things that have been reported?
Yes.
And-
To be,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
to be clear, so there is a log or a log equivalent of things that
Well,
are reported, because you use that
we-
term
Yeah,
specifically.
and it may not be a log.
We have it's an email, it's a JDC all staff. So however, just not to get too complicated, Ms. Todd does maintain multiple maintenance logs, what's
That answers my question.
outstanding
Thank you.
and all that as well.
That's fine. That was the point of my question. Judge Newman?
Yeah, the thing that I was thinking about is juvenile detention and juvenile facility. The terminology for the entire building, is that something that's confusing here or not? Just for confusing for me.
Probably just for you, I'm going to change it so that it is clear that it's only for the employees that work for the Juvenile Detention Center.
Okay.
So you will work out language for this?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
We're on page 80, unless anybody objects.
And you had mentioned earlier that you were trying to decide about the intake, and I guess this is the intake, standard operating
Okay.
procedure. So right there in the first line, the decision, I guess I'd like a little more detail about that decision-making process.
And I believe that one of the first meetings, that was where Judge Daniel also was referencing that it should read differently. And so I think that's
Yeah.
the correct place for it.
And you've gotten by me. I was trying to remember where I was supposed to jump in, so let's back up to
Okay.
page 73.
No, there's no page number.
I was told, Judge Daniel, that we cannot back up about columns earlier.
Oh, no.
We've been overruled.
Okay.
Where are we backing up?
Page 73, this is an area I'm really concerned with, and I think it's the reason we're here, really. On the determination for an initial detention, I want to propose, and I typed this out, so that, and that's scary when I type.
Are we on page 73, Judge? Because that's where I rolled back to.
That's correct, page 73.
Okay, and for clarity's sake, can you specifically identify the part of
Next to last
4-02 that,
Okay.
next to last paragraph? Thank you, sir.
Pass these out, if you wouldn't mind. So here's the issue on the detention, the starting of the process, initial detention. Obviously, it has to be criteria 37-1-114 or 116. So my suggestion is that the language be amended to reflect, and what I have underlined is what I would like to add, and that the probable cause required by these statutes be determined by one of the following: the juvenile judge, the juvenile judicial magistrate, or a licensed Tennessee attorney. Probable cause is a unique legal definition. It's very important that independent magistrate make that before the loss of freedom. And that was really some of the bedrock of why we got in trouble, I think.
So we are currently doing this. This language is great. And this kind of also speaks to what where we were before we went back. And I think that using it is in both places would work, unless there's a problem with that.
Okay. Everybody in agreement with that?
And part of, just, for my own sake, the reason I left it that vague at the time was that Judge Lampley had not come in, and I didn't know if he was going to be making any additional changes to that process.
Nick, you see a outstanding issue here at all?
I do not.
Okay, good.
I do not, and like I said, we're gonna bring these all back, and if
Sure.
I chew on it, and Judge, I wanna change something, I'll ask you and see what you think, but no,
Perfect.
immediately, this is fine.
Okay, good. I think this is the more substantive change that we've made so far, and so I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity to address it if there's a concern, that's all.
Okay, so I think maybe mine is the next one, looking at. Yeah, so if we'll go to page 95 now. Page 95, the code yellow, I would suggest would just simply go to the juvenile judge.
Yes. Well,
Juvenile judge's court.
Oh, yes.
okay.
Page
As opposed to
95.
Judge Davenport's.
Oh, yes, yeah, that was a
It could be in a courtroom. There are two
Oh, and you
courtrooms out
might
here.
say the juvenile
The appropriate.
court, the appropriate juvenile courtroom, because you've got magistrates maybe operating.
Right, and we can do that.
Yeah.
That was just I just missed that when we revamped it.
Okay.
And would you need to add in there courtroom and or hearing room, since the hearing room's different from the court, or does it matter?
I'd have to look to
It's
see
just
if
an
they,
it's just an example.
Example.
Yeah.
We're just giving an example of how to say the code.
Gotcha, okay.
128
Page 128, I can see that this is it has come from the
Minimum,
standards
yes.
from DCS,
Yes.
but I'm just wondering if we want to go ahead and specify, since we know where we're located, should we talk about it's Rutherford County Schools as opposed to the LEA where the JDC is located?
Lynn, is there any city schools that are involved, or is that?
It's
is
just
Rutherford
county.
County Board of Education?
Cities only, K through 6.
Okay.
potentially there, I mean, you never say never. It would be unusual and rare, but in theory, there could be, I mean, there was a 6-year-old that shot his teacher in Virginia, so.
So is there a reason why we
No
wouldn't
words.
reference both of them?
Yeah.
Well, I'd rather keep it broad, but I'm not opposed to the change that Ms. Collins suggests. LEA is a standard acronym
It is.
for local
Yes.
education agency.
And it does mean Rutherford County and Murfreesboro City. It does mean that exactly.
Whichever appropriate one is applicable to a certain situation, that's what we're going to do.
But you know, this makes it's so broad, it makes it sound like we don't know where we are, and we do know where we are.
I don't know half the time, I question myself.
So you can specify our local LEAs.
Got it. Will do.
You just say LEAs within Rutherford County, Tennessee, beach, fatal sweep. You got everything.
I know you all are disappointed that I'm at the end of my list.
Okay, I'm on 137. And questions on the abbreviations,
Okay.
CPI, tap out, PRT.
Okay, so I can, spell those out. A tap out is just a tap out. It's just it's a behavior tool that we use. If I'm working with you and you are not having it, I might say, hey, you're in, I'm out, he's not listening to me. And we tapping out.
Oh, okay.
Like,
So that's an exchange.
Yeah. I think it is actually the term used in CPI. Now, CPI is a primary,
Crisis prevention.
is it institute?
Intervention?
Intervention, yeah. So I think tap out is actually the term used in that training, But I can look, and I would definitely spell out the CPI.
If you would, that would probably
Okay.
reflect everybody here was trying to, okay, that would be good. What's PRT?
Primary restraint technique, which is not one thing, it's a several
Right.
things, yeah.
Okay. I think you got the next one.
Okay. Page 148. Third bullet from the bottom. I understand where you're coming from on major rule violations, but if it's truly suicidal behavior, self-harm, or indication of a serious plan, I think maybe we ought to separate that from some of these other rule violations. I know you don't want people doing certain things, but to tag it as a rule violation, if it's really a mental health issue.
Got it.
So like I say, I don't know if you need to drop it out or put it elsewhere, but
Well, okay, never mind.
you see what I mean?
I see exactly what
When
you
you
mean.
see the
And so
list.
I didn't see self-harm, so I'm thinking, what about banging your head on a wall? And because I was reading up here, banging on a wall, I thought, well, what if but it says self-harm, and that's what
Yes.
that would be, so I corrected myself.
Okay, then, I thought there was a typo on 157, but now I don't see it. It's called confirming a pregnancy, it said conforming a pregnancy. It may have been, I think it may have been changed, but I can't even find it right now, but, let me just check that, see if it was it.
And confirmed by a healthcare professional?
And I think you probably wanted to say conformed.
I may have already changed it.
Okay. So that's good. All right, then 162, it says that there's one of those instances that takes place that you notify. Who's notified?
Where are we?
Page 162, spell out who's notified. Notification, G,
G.
and documentation.
Notification.
This is dealing with a chemical agent.
Okay, notification shall
And
include the following.
Section 2,
Occur-
Judge?
Yeah, it's on page,
G2, is that what you're referring to, though, the notification of who gets it?
well, at the top, it says
The list.
notification and documentation.
And I think this is straight from the state.
It is. However, this may be, these areas, as far as chemical defense, restraint, and all those, these would be the areas that I would not want to just say, let's refer to the state minimum standards, because it needs to be in the SOP, so that I don't have to give my employees the minimum standards just for these parts. But these parts, barring typos, were taken word for word from minimum standards, and they are in the process of revamping them again, so they will be changing again.
Will they change who you notify?
I don't know.
Well, now who do you notify?
Well, it depends on, so the G is just, I think, the section. This section is going to talk about notification and documentation of chemical defense agencies.
Well, down in 2, you say the youth's parents and legal guardians.
Yes.
Is there anybody else that would be notified other than that? Perhaps state, county, county attorney?
It's not a requirement under minimum standards. They do notify the on-call administrator. And like I said, this part, now, anything obviously can be added anywhere, but this part is just what the state requires us to do.
I just wondered if you needed a copy or knowledge of that, or something that you.
Yeah,
you
so
know.
I only ask for if there's things that are outside the bounds of normal
conduct in the jail. So if we've got, if chemical defense agent, it should be, rare, because you should have other behavioral mechanisms to help, that from occurring, but you can't prevent all the times that's gonna happen. But if the child is like, severely injured and falls in the accident or something like that, she probably will let me know that there's not just a typical occurrence of that. Plus, Lynn, these documents, are they reviewed by the state as
Yes.
part of the audit? So that they'll, when they go through every, they'll see the documentation of when and how it was used.
I just thought maybe that would be a good,
And it's really reporting to them that this is
To the
about,
state.
isn't it? Isn't that,
I'm sorry.
really, it's about reporting to the state and them being able to compare your detention center with others about how frequently you use it. and
Right, there's
who's being
actually
used
a
to
form
use it.
that they have created that we use in all of these circumstances, and it has on there, did you contact the parent, what time, who did it, et cetera.
And they
county attorney, I
generate
thought
some
might need to
statistics.
know
Yes.
this for the purpose of their own preparation, if there was some legal.
Usually, if it's something unusual, or as he said, is outside normal boundaries, then I will call and say, hey, heads up,
Okay.
this is what's going on, but it's,
Case by case.
Hopefully, we don't get any of those calls, because if not, that means we're doing stuff the right way. But yeah, you're right. You're right.
All right, 173.
Before we move to 173, if I might, how many, we're coming up on 3 o'clock. How many more do we have, Judge?
It's got 5 more pages.
That's why I asked. See, I took this opportunity.
Oh, I'm just kidding. This is the last one.
Okay, well then we're good.
On the, this is dealing with grievance
Okay.
and complaints. Should the board, you have to get a copy of these?
that's completely y'all's call.
So that we know about it.
I can think of reasons why it might be better if individual board members would like to see those, to just call Lynn and say, hey,
How would we even know that they've happened?
just ask her, say, hey. the last
Well,
month-
there, I believe on our monthly public safety report, there is a counting of the total.
For the entire county or for just?
No, just
a part?
like for juvenile detention, it'll say grievances, and then like December, it might say 0 or 3, or, it's okay, yeah, thank you. That's one of the things that we report monthly to the Public Safety Committee.
Okay.
And I know we initially got those documents, but we have not been receiving them for the last 2 or 3 meetings.
Right, we talked about those being available on SharePoint.
Okay.
I believe is how we were,
And then it referenced the video too, so you could go back and watch
Sure.
it if you wanted to.
But she doesn't read the report on the video, she just says, here it is.
correct.
So,
Right.
But there's an image of it. I mean, I scan it to OIT, so I mean, you can review the report. Because it's not a graphic, but it's
PDF.
detailed.
It's a PDF
Yeah.
like if she uploaded this entire book on SharePoint, it would be out there for you to review. So even though she doesn't read it line by line, it gives you the entire report.
okay.
And if you don't know how to use that, myself or Lynn
Not me.
okay, myself, you can call me and I can show you how to get to it.
Remember, I keep
Okay.
papers.
It's very user-friendly once you know.
Right, once you know how to do it. So you just call me and you be at the computer and I'll be at the computer and we'll walk through it.
Okay. They hadn't seen me yet. Anyway, that's all I have.
Any other members?
I just have one quick question. It's probably more logistic than anything. All of this action we're taking, will the effective date be updated?
Yeah, so,
I know it's a given, but I just want to make sure that it's done, that's all.
Yeah, if I recall, I think it was last meeting, you all at least adopted the current version that had my red line changes.
Right.
Just to go work from that.
Right.
So what I envisioned is staff and myself will get together and we'll make the changes that, by the way, you probably need a motion to be
Okay.
made that accepts everything we've discussed. And I don't think it's necessary based on, at least from my perspective, going through line by line, if somebody just makes a motion to direct the staff to make these changes and bring them back next month for
Okay.
final approval. And then once there's final approval of those, the effective date of the SOP can be updated.
Okay, great, thank you, thank you.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Make the motion that these identified changes be made by staff and brought back to the board next month or as soon as possible for final approval.
And we have a second, and there was no dissension on any of the items brought forth before the board. So, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. There, of course, there will be no no's because there were no objections earlier. So, thank you. Finally, is there any other business before the board? Ms. Duke, you have something?
No, I just wanted to make, I'm noting, I'm my own
Anybody
note
have
writer.
any other business?
Two quick questions. One, what is our role in the budget process? Number one, and number two, is it possible we can invite our grant administrator to maybe one of our future meetings?
So there certainly is an opportunity for us to invite the grant administrator as soon as we can get her to fly in from Colorado. So that's,
Oh,
yeah. Yes, she lives in Colorado. And so this is, and she is, let me just say, she is incredibly
Terrific.
terrific.
Absolutely.
And so this county is absolutely fortunate to have her wherever she decides to go.
She had retired and had a
Yes.
hard time finding somebody
Yes.
to fill her shoes.
Okay.
And so when all the COVID monies came in and all these other monies came in, at the time, finance director Nolan reached out to her and said, would you consider unretiring and doing this until we can make other adjustments? So it's hard to find somebody that's.
And we're looking to add to that as, because there's additional grant money out there that may be available. So
Okay.
maybe we could Zoom her in, or we could get her on a conference call
That'd be
or
great.
something like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure that
Yeah.
would be more possible than next time. She does come in periodically. I don't want to say she doesn't. So let's find out what her schedule is, and then maybe we can work around
Okay,
that.
thank you.
With regard, yes, sir.
Go ahead, you're asking about the budget, but you.
Yeah, I was going to say, with regard to the budget, typically how that process works is the mayor's office and the finance director work directly with the directors in establishing that budget. However, this board would communicate to the director any ideas, requests, that then she would then bring back to the mayor and the finance director, because it's up to the county commission to make that final determination.
Okay, thank you.
Is that satisfactory? If there are no objections, we stand adjourned.